The following story is a patron request for Alexis Lavoie, which I'm probably murdering that name, and I apologize. Also, to their girlfriend Ivy, happy birthday. The following is written by Alexis Lavoie and is called The Vampire Ivy. Hello there. You'll have to forgive me if this intro, or any of the story, is a bit awkward. I am not the best writer. Hell, I barely managed to make it 10 pages into any story I write. Alexis likes my writing, but she seems to love everything I make, no matter how shit it is. It's crazy how after all these centuries she still loves me. You know of the vampire Alexis, right? I'm assuming it's how you found out about this little story here. She's currently writing a huge book herself, and I assure you that it's going to be a masterpiece. She has other little works of fiction out there, and I recommend you read them. Alexis is a very gifted writer. Anyway, I have a little story to tell you. I hope you find it interesting. You see, I've developed quite differently than Alexis, and I want people to realize that. Alexis paints us vampires in a very dark light. Not on purpose, though. Alexis is certain that all of us, vampires and humans alike, are locked into a state of misery that we are forever damned to stay into, and I simply disagree with her on that. Humans and vampires can both do good things, and do them for unselfish reasons. That's what I want to try to show in this story, because you won't be seeing it in hers. We are going to jump centuries back, into the 1700s, during Washington's war against Britain. I was born on a farm, in a village on the brims of old Boston. Despite how cold it got there in the winter, it was a cute enough farm. It had 4 rooms in it altogether, including the kitchen, and the beds were comfortable enough. Had it not been for Aldous, my life would have been decent there. I was the only child of my parents. As I'm sure you know, there was always lots of work to do on farms back then, far more than you must do on farms these days, so my father Aldous wasn't exactly thrilled that I was a female. Females simply didn't go out to work on the farm in those days. I stayed inside with my mother to do housework. My mother almost died while giving birth to me, and I'm guessing her fallopian tubes were damaged in the process, or maybe it was because Aldous beat her after seeing I was a girl. I'll never know for sure. Aldous forced her to have sex with him every night for years. She never got pregnant again. I was all he was getting, and he wasn't going to accept that. One day, when I was 10 years old, late at night when my mom was asleep, he came into my room and shook me awake. I immediately noticed that he was naked, and the look he had in his eyes made a pound of lead fall into my stomach and slosh around. I couldn't speak. He told me that I owed him for being alive, and that I had to repay him for being female and forcing him to do all the farm work by himself. I asked him how I could do that, and he immediately put his hand over my eyes and forced my head into the pillow. He promptly started violating me seconds later. I know that rape isn't exactly something you readers wish to have described to you, so I will spare you the details. You must, however, try to realize just how life-changing it is. You are never the same again once you've been violated. Rape isn't a thing you recover from, just something you manage to live with. I should know. I've been trying to move on for almost 900 years now. Aldous would thrust too hard. There was so much blood. I was in pain for days afterwards. I felt spiritually unclean. It was as if Aldous' rape had closed the gates of heaven for me, and that nothing would ever open them for me again. It's not that I stopped believing that God existed after that. It's just that I didn't believe he would accept me. Whenever I prayed after that, I always imagined him having his face or back turned against me, ignoring my words. Please don't feel sympathy for me. It continued for years after that, and I should have done something to stop it. Alexis tells me that it wasn't my fault, but she's full of shit. What right does she have to judge? She wasn't there. I could have told my mom. I could have ran away. I could have resisted Aldous. I gave in, and gave in like a bitch. I actually moaned for him sometimes just to make him happy. I was trying to make my rapist happy. How wasn't it my fault? Well, nothing lasts forever. I was 16 on the day that it all ended. Aldous wanted to change things up by doing it on his bed. He plunked me on the bed and spread my legs, started thrusting. Then he was gone. I thought that he was simply taking a break, trying to relish in my misery. When half a minute passed with nothing but pure silence, I opened my eyes and looked ahead of me. At first all I saw was the full moon shining through the window, but as I kept looking I eventually saw 2 pairs of eyes, 2 pairs of pale, blue, glowing eyes, and they were both focused on me, and Aldous was gone. I heard whispers, harsh male whispers. They sounded like a man trying to rush someone, but I couldn't quite make them out. Then, faster than I could track, one of the pairs of eyes lunged at me. I saw the person's face seconds before he reached me. His face was bone white with black, greasy hair. I saw fangs gleam in the moonlight as they moved to my neck. I passed out. I woke up minutes later, I am told, and when I did, I almost fainted again immediately. The pale man with the black hair was held against the wall by a knife impaling his throat. Despite the injury, there was very little blood, and he appeared fully conscious. Knelt in front of him was a figure in smart black robes, using her hands to rip open his stomach. From his stomach, blood gushed out, and the figure had her mouth open and was drinking it happily. Once the river of blood ceased, the robed figure stood up and faced me. Despite having blood coating her face and the front of her robes, I couldn't help but find her beautiful. I remember noticing how narrow her face was. "Don't worry, miss," said the woman. "He won't harm you." The last thing I remember before fainting was Aldous' bloodless corpse in the ground beside my bed. The woman had been Alexis. She had saved me that night, both from Aldous and from the other vampire wishing to suck me dry. Please remember that when reading Alexis's book, she is capable of doing good, just like all of us. She will constantly tell you in her novel that she is evil and undeserving of love, but don't listen to her. She is a beautiful vampire woman who doesn't give herself enough credit. And yes, to answer your question, she turned me into a vampire soon after. With my permission, of course. And so I was made into an immortal at the age of 16. I had been certain at that time that I was 15 when it all happened, but some time later I realized that the transformation had happened on September 27th, my birthday. I do not know why Alexis chose me to be her progeny. I barely knew my savior at the time, or why she looked down at me with such love and affection. The thought of two women loving each other had never even crossed my mind before, but I knew for certain, throughout this and all our adventures afterwards, that I loved Alexis in a way I had never loved anyone else, or ever will. I woke up, shivering, lying on the bed, bleeding greatly from my abuser, cuts and scrapes and bruises all over my body. Tears streamed down my face as I locked eyes with the being standing over the corpse of my rapist. I didn't understand what was going on, but I wasn't at all afraid of the intruder dressed all in black, her pale blue irises glowing through the shadow cast from her hood. The stranger had removed the two bodies, and it took me a few seconds to remember what had happened. Still, no fear rose in my heart as I remembered the hooded woman ripping open the stomach of the other intruder. I do not know why I was so calm. I studied the woman more as she moved towards me. A black velvet cape was draped over her shoulders, and gorgeous black leather boots were worn on her feet. The robe she was wearing, all black as well, clung to her body to perfectly be made for anyone other than her. Fingerless leather gloves were worn in her hands, and I would learn later on in life that all of this clothing had been tailored by the woman, who had taught herself the craft when others wouldn't train her. From the belt the woman pulled out a stiletto, the blade softly glinting in the moonlight. Still I felt no fear, lying still, my crying ceasing. Pulling back her left sleeve, the woman brought the knife to her arm, and in one swift movement cut deep into her arm, moving the limb above me so that the blood would fall onto my naked body. I closed my eyes during the process, feeling the blood fall into my wounds, my skin absorbing the blood and using it to heal all physical wounds and eliminate any disease that may have entered my body during the ordeal. I do not know how many times the woman needed to cut her arm, but I can imagine that it was many times, so quickly her delicate skin heals. When I opened my eyes, the stiletto was back in the woman's belt, her arms hidden back within her cape, her glowing blue eyes still fixated on me. Not a drop of her blood had landed on the bed, and my skin had absorbed it all. Only the blood from the womanhood, which had stopped bleeding, stained the sheets. I felt strong, more powerful than I had ever felt before in my life. I did not yet realize what her blood had done to me. All I knew was that I trusted her and that I wasn't afraid. Without any words being shared between the two of us, the woman helped me get dressed. When I was at last in my nightgown, the woman pulled her hood back and revealed her face. Never had I seen such a slender face before. Her jaw was firm and her lips a dark shade of red. Her eyes, although they appeared pale blue and glowing when her hood was up, were a chocolate brown, and when I looked into them the pain I felt festering in her soul made my stomach churn. Not a scar, wrinkle, pimple, or blemish marred her perfect skin, and long luscious brown hair fell down over her shoulders. She was too beautiful to be human. I have troubles to this day believing her when she tells me she looked identical centuries ago. Before I could say anything, the woman gracefully sat the two of us onto my bed and gave the most passionate kiss I have ever received. It felt like a fire racing through her lips and into my entire body, except this was a fire that did not know how to burn and only warmed all that touched it. When she pulled back, I could see a tint of blue glowing in her brown eyes. "What is your name?" she asked simply. After a few seconds, I found my tongue and responded, "Alexis." The woman's eyes widened, and a slight blush rose to her flawless cheeks. "Then we will need to find a new name for you." I was puzzled, and tilted my head to the side. "Why?" "Because that has been my name for centuries," responded the woman, "and someone as precious as you should not have the same name as a demon." Not all these words made sense to me, but I nodded nonetheless. And what should I be called then, vampire? My words left my lips without me thinking, and the final accusation surprised me. The woman's eyebrows raised slightly. "You jumped to that conclusion faster than I expected. Nevertheless, you are correct. How does the name Ivy sound to you?" "Ivy," I said to myself, feeling the name on my tongue. "I like it. It suits me. Why Ivy, though?" Alexis stood up, and ignoring my question, bit hard into her wrist with her fangs, and offered the fountain from her wrist towards me. "I recommend you drink, Ivy. You cannot stay here any more. We need to find a new home for you. My blood will give you the strength you need." I looked at the thick red nectar flowing from her wrist, the wound strangely not healing immediately like the ones from her stiletto did. I knew that I should be repelled by the thought of drinking another's blood, but something about her blood was so appealing that it was almost irresistible. Without uttering another word, I firmly grasped her arm and put my mouth around the wound, drinking fast and greedily. Nothing in my entire life had ever tasted so delicious or smooth as the vampiric blood, and I could feel my entire body strengthening seconds after swallowing the precious fluid. After I don't know how long, Alexis gently withdrew her arm and rolled her sleeve back down over it. In what felt like a drunken haze, I looked up at her and was taken aback by how exhausted she looked. I had no idea how taxing the drink had been on her. "Don't worry about it. I know what to expect," she said, as if reading my thoughts. She opened her arms to me. "Come to me, Ivy. Let me show you what I am." Falling into a deep infatuation, I dropped into Alexis's arms. Her arms wrapped me up in a tight and loving grasp, pulling the cape with them to cover my face and block my sight. I could feel the two of us moving immediately at incomprehensible speeds. I didn't scream, however. As I have stated before, I trusted Alexis completely, and to this day I do not know why I gave over so much trust to her so fast. A few minutes passed, and Alexis told me gently to open my eyes. When I did, the two of us were standing on a tree branch incredibly high off the ground. Alexis held me firm, and when I looked down I saw the snowy winter forest ground. With the help of Alexis, I sat down on the branch, and Alexis helped me get a safe and comfortable grasp on the branch. "Listen," whispered Alexis. I did as she said, and the steady beat of a snare drum was soon meeting my ears. I scanned the ground and soon saw a small group of British redcoats patrolling the forest. A general, with his tall, fancy hat and cutlass, was leading a squad of 4 regulars, with a drum man tagging behind, playing the snare drum. Although the general was filled with a righteous zeal, the 5 other members looked both incredibly bored and exhausted. "These men fight for a country that want to keep your land under a strict tyrannical rule," said Alexis as the group moved closer to the ground directly below us. "Although this war America is in is not their fault, I do not sympathize with their cause, and I am very hungry." I said nothing in response. I knew what Alexis planned to do. The group moved directly below us, and I watched as Alexis fell without a sound and landed on the drummer. She landed on his head, crushing his face and throat into the ground. As the remaining 5 began to turn, Alexis pulled out her stiletto with superhuman speed and slashed the throats of the 2 nearest regulars, the soldiers falling to the ground as they choked on their own blood. One of the remaining regulars thrusted his bayonet at Alexis, but she sidestepped and grabbed the musket, using the momentum from the soldier to turn him and embed the bayonet into his partner's heart. She then delivered a strike to the regular's head, which instantly broke his neck, a loud crack echoing throughout the forest. Only the general remained, who still stood brave and gave a confident stab of his cutlass at Alexis. Alexis sidestepped it with ease and grabbed his wrist, twisting it and breaking it instantly. The general yelled as he dropped his cutlass, and Alexis wasted no time to pull him into an embrace and bite hard into his neck. She must have only held him in the embrace for 40 seconds at the most, but it was enough to drain the general. I could see his skin grow pale and tighten around his face. Alexis let the corpse slump into the snow, and she stood still for a moment in the red snow and let the blood strengthen her body. I was mesmerized. It was hard for me to describe how I felt, but I did not believe the death of the men to be either just or necessary, but at the same time I did not feel any pity for them. The whole scene was both gross and beautiful at the same time. I had neither admiration or anger towards Alexis, merely fascination. Alexis climbed the tree and sat beside me, locking eyes with me. Her eyes were once again a pale, glowing blue. Softly, but firmly, she spoke. "The man who killed the one raping you, the man you saw me rip the stomach open of, he was a vampire who was coincidentally going to attack your farm at the same time I was. When I didn't want to feed on you, he was about to, but I stopped him. I was hungry, so hungry that I was close to death, so I ripped open his stomach and drank the blood he had drank from the one raping you. I didn't come to your farm intending to save you. You were meant to be a meal for me as well. But something about you makes me feel different." I said nothing in response. Too much was happening too fast for my brain to process it all properly. Alexis broke my gaze and looked down at the forest floor. "Your mom is fine, safe, unaware of what went down in the bedroom. There is a civil war raging in this country, and I sensed in your thoughts as you drank from me that you would love very much to participate in this war. I sense that you value freedom just as much as I do, and the Patriots claim to be fighting for just that. I can return you to your home, with your mother, and leave you alone forever. Or I can take you with me. I can make you a vampire, and together you and I could participate in this war if you would wish. The choice is yours. I have never created a progeny before, and I would love to have you as my first." How could I refuse such an offer? On my farm I had absolutely nothing. No hope for a better future, no fancy clothes, no fancy food, no independence. The thought of having to hurt people to survive did not sound so bad when I had already been hurt so much at such a young age. Perhaps the yes I uttered to her was made brashly, but I don't regret it. Alexis took me to her little hideout hidden in Boston and kept me cozy in her bed. It would take 3 days for the blood she'd given me to prepare my body for the transformation, and in the meantime she served me the most delicious meals I had ever had. "Enjoy them," said Alexis. "You won't get to eat solid food as a vampire." On the 3rd day, with my own consent, I died, and 3 days after that I was reborn as the most powerful species that wanders this planet.